What's up, y'all? It's Feeds back with a new style, or I guess a new approach to the heroes. We're gonna be talking a lot about the hero builds that a lot of people don't address, and that's gonna be your bad RNG builds. That's everything from you didn't pull a legendary you wanted to you don't have the right team to fight anyone, and all you happen to pull is a Coffin Smasher. And I'm here to tell you today, boys, that bad RNG might as well be blessed RNG. Today's build, Coffin Smasher, he is phenomenal for a lot of reasons, and more specifically, he's phenomenal because you can make him a very meaty boy without having to put a whole bunch of effort in. And if you happen to be a person like myself who has bad RNG when it comes to pulls, and it's just taking me a really long time to pull what I wanted, I went with a build that solely has items that you would get relatively easy. Um, they're going to be a little bit higher rated just because I did higher rated stuff, but ultimately it's nothing that you would have to spend 2 to 3 weeks to 4 months to farm to get these items. They're not even necessarily optimized for the build that I typically would want to do for Coffin Smasher. In the long run, obviously, I have some better items that I would equip on him if this is to be a guy I was going to use. But for the sake of doing things like arenas, if you will, to doing the campaign, to doing really anything you wanted to, Coffin Smasher is a solid pick. And I'm going to go over the stats first. We'll talk about his masteries, stats and masteries, and then I'll kind of showcase what he does with just your login rewards. That's going to be your Sickle of Dragons, and that's all we're going to use to counter him with or to put him with, so you can kind of get an idea for it. Now, if you go to the reviews first, he's going to be decently rated in some areas: campaign location, spiders den, arena defense, arena offense. And objectively, these things are a bunch of hogwash. And the reason why is because these are all rooted in the fact that you have something better. And so, what I like to look at too when it comes to it is how can I kind of fine tune these characters to be optimized within what I have. So the first thing that you want to look at is the fact that he is a magic affinity. Magic affinity happens to be ends up being one of the weaker affinities just through the campaigns because you deal with a lot of force affinities, you deal with a lot of green affinities, you deal with a lot of that extra stuff that kind of is counterintuitive to it. More force than anything else. Force and your void affinities are really hard to deal with just because you don't get the additional damage against them, you don't get the additional crits, so on and so forth when it comes to it. So, as you can see, when we look at the total stats on this guy, he is just a dump truck for health. He's got almost 70,000 HP. His attack's 1477, and his defense is 1970. Speed 125. It's a little on the low end. Like I said, this isn't optimized gear. This is gear that I just kind of had that I was able to put together for him. Crit rate 70%. Realistically, I'd like to get a little bit higher, but it was really hard to even find a set that worked for him. That I'd consider bad RNG type stuff. And then, of course, crit damage 115, debuff resistance 246, and debuff accuracy 177. Now, these two are pretty important just because of the fact that he does have a couple abilities that require accuracy. The first and foremost is his Mallet Crescendo. Attacks one enemy 3 times. Each has a 15% chance of placing a 50% decreased attack debuff for 2 turns. And the damage is based on HP, so that's why we stacked a ton of HP with them when it comes to it. I'm not necessarily sure if the HP to damage modifier is higher than just what raw attack damage is, but for the sake, I built it this way, and it's worked out so far. But you have 7 levels to it. You can get it up, and at the 7th level, you get the highest debuff chance that comes with it. The benefit of this is that you decrease the attack, so you decrease the overall damage that's being done, and you have 3 opportunities to do it. Now, the reason why the 3 attacks is so huge, because if you were to pair this with another character you started with, like Aethel, or if you happen to pull a War Priest and you put the 3-hit combo there with the Ice, gives you a lot of opportunity, or a variety of other kind of inopportune characters work really well with this guy. And the best part too is if you take him long game, if you take him to the end game, you get the ability of having Giant Slayer with it. So the 3 hits is actually pretty pivotal. Plays a huge role in Clan Boss. It gives him a pretty good opportunity to do some early on damage. You could pair him with the Monk. You can put him with a lot of different characters that would do really well when it comes to it. So his Tomb Fire ability, this is kind of his bread and butter for some of his heavier HP bosses. Attacks one enemy, has 50% chance to place an HP burn debuff for 2 turns. Damage based on HP. And then, of course, you can take it all the way up to level 90, the highest increase buff debuff chance available for him. HP burn is pretty significant, even after the nerfs that it's gone through over the last year. HP burn is still really significant. Does a ton of damage. Early spider boss you can use it on. Obviously, it's not your typical burn that you do on a spider boss, but still gives you plenty of opportunity to do it on any of the dungeon bosses that you fight. Gives you an able opportunity to do it on any of the arena fights that you have. HP burn's not never a bad thing, and the reality is that when you get it up there, it does a decent chunk of damage, and can potentially turn it in your favor when you're looking at it. And then of course his passive, Gloom Mist, decreases the damage enemies inflict with AoE attacks by 5%, which obviously any AoE boss that you fight, that's going to be a majority of your campaign bosses. That's going to be your clan boss. It's going to be a variety of different bosses that you deal with, as well as some arena people that like Skullcrown that have AoE attacks with it. So um, pretty significant. 5% doesn't seem like a lot, but it adds up, especially if you have a lot of turns in there. With clan boss, for instance, if you go 20, 30 turns, you're going to be in an interesting spot. And then, of course, here's his mastery setup. Um, I went with a pretty traditional layout for his masteries. Went with the crit rate, and crit damage. Objectively, I think having 100% crits like the optimal build if you're going to do this guy. I just don't have the items to get him there at this current point. Went with Heart of Glory, increases damage inflicted by 5% when attacking with full HP. Long as you have a healer in the group, that shouldn't be an issue that comes with it. So you should get the extra 5% damage. And then, of course, Whirlwind of Death increases speed for each enemy killed by the champion, provided you're doing the two-man challenges to get all 3 stars in your campaign. This is actually pretty significant because once you get to the third round, you've got a decent chunk of speed going for you. And then, of course, has Cycle of Violence has a 30% chance to decrease the cooldown of random skill by 1 turn. This is pretty good if you're doing your HP burn debuff and gives you that extra opportunity there. And then, most importantly, Giant Slayer has a 30% chance of inflicting bonus damage when attacking. Bonus damage is equal to 7.5% of the target champion max HP or 3% of the target max HP when attacking bosses. And you already know the Giant Slayer is kind of the meta, if you will, when fighting with a 3 strike hero when you're looking at it. Now, there's a couple of different ways I could have gone with this build. I could have gone super defensive with it. I decided to go a little bit more utility based, just because if I were to do the 2 star challenges or 3 star challenges, I kind of want to build it that way. So I went with HP, obviously for the additional damage. I understand that the accuracy is there and available. I just decided it wasn't proper for this build. Not saying that accuracy wouldn't be a good alternative. It's just not the option that I went with for this guy. Exalt Death, heal the champion by 10% of their max HP the first time an enemy is killed in each round. That's pretty good, especially if you're doing those 3 star challenges, so you don't have those issues when it comes to it. And then, of course, Arcane Celerity has 30% chance of increasing turn meter by 10% when a debuff cast by the champion is removed or expires. So your A1 and your A2 both have debuffs that they put on there. So this is pretty good. You can potentially get your turn meter up there, which is huge if you're lacking in the speed area. And then, of course, your typical Lore of Steel, get your base stat set bonuses of all artifacts that increase the base stats by 15%. This increase is multiplicative, not additive. Obviously, I went with very basic sets, so it allowed me to get that extra opportunity there. And then, of course, Evil Eye decreases target's turn meter when the champion hits them with the default skill for the first time. Um, that's just pretty straightforward, kind of standard to help reduce the output that you have from the bosses. And then, of course, increases the chance of placing any debuffs from skills or artifacts. Sniper, I feel like it's pretty huge, especially when you've only got so much percentage available with your HP burn and your A1 attack. Just a really good way to kind of format and push it through. So, Coffin Smasher, what I put with him, and a Divine Life would just happen to be the right stats on there. It didn't have to be Divine. Um, for the sake life build and of course define offense. These are just very typical builds. You get them from doing arenas, you get them from doing dragons, divine life for life. You get effectively from doing a lot of different stuff when it comes to it, whether you do campaign or bosses. And then of course offense or divine offense you can get through arenas, bosses, etc. So there's no limitation to it. I think the big thing for this is having the HP pool and then making sure that you have enough accuracy and resist to basically not be stunned and CC'd. So for your crit bosses and stuff like that, you're not in a weird spot. And just to show you who he's going to be paired with, so my Cycle of Dragons doesn't have a ton of stats, nothing crazy, doesn't have super high speed, not using anything too crazy, divine crit rate, divine speed, and offense. And then, of course, not even kitted out, not even booked out. So my Sickle of Drakes will be very minimal in the things that I do. And I'll just show you real quick kind of what you can do on a brutal campaign. If you were to do just a stage 7 boss, which for some people can be a little bit harder, I'll just show you no auras that come with it. So this is completely, if you were to be free to play, you just had the login rewards and you happen to have Coffin Smasher when it comes to it. So um, nothing too crazy. You get you can see he does a decent amount of damage, 27k. Obviously, when you have 100% crit and a little bit more crit damage, he'll be a little bit more impactful when it comes to those things. Um, but gives you the ample opportunity to make sure that you can clear through it pretty quickly. Again, this isn't nothing too fancy, nothing too crazy. Gives you the idea. Obviously, as you go up or scale up higher in bosses and stuff like that, you'll have a harder challenge. But the benefit is it just means it's going to be a little bit longer. So this is definitely not the fastest clear speed. It never will be. But this is the alternative if you don't have the ability to have good RNG. And so the reason why this also works so well is especially against a lot of your green affinities, your spirit affinities, you're going to have the opportunity to do a ton of damage. And then, of course, with Giant Slayer, does a ton of damage there when it comes to it. So the other thing too is um, when you're looking at doing stuff like Faction Wars, the Faction Wars reset, so I can't show you. Is that he works really well because a lot of the higher end affinities that you deal with are affinities that necessarily counter your magic affinities. So that'll be it. If you guys have any questions about Coffin Smasher specifically, what else I've run him with and tested him with, feel free to hit me up in the comments or message me directly. I'll be available. I'm going to be putting up a lot more of these bad RNG builds just to kind of give you an idea of other opportunities or builds you can use for characters. Unless you want to whale out a little bit or you want to put a ton of money into it or just try and kind of bide your time so you get lucky. There's a lot of opportunities with a ton of different characters. The tier lists that are currently available for a lot of these characters aren't accurate because they haven't been fully tested. And I know it's kind of, it's measured off some weird metrics there. So again, if you guys have any questions, feel free to hit me up. If you like the video, go ahead and hit the thumbs up below. And if you like enough to follow, go ahead and hit the subscribe button up top. Until then, guys, keep raiding.
Run! It's gonna be a left click. It's gonna be a left click.
Woo!